What would you do if kindness destroyed your life? Evelyn was about to find out. 3 weeks after old Mr. Whitmore's funeral, the bell above Sal's diner choked on its own sound. It was supposed to jingle, cheerful and familiar, but instead it clattered, dull and wrong. Evelyn looked up from pouring coffee, and that's when she saw them. 3 men, impossibly dry despite the rain hammering Chicago's streets. They moved like predators, synchronized and cold, stepping into the smell of bacon and burnt toast as if they owned the oxygen itself. Before we continue, this is True Spark Stories, where real life hits harder than fiction. If you love stories that make you feel something deep, hit that subscribe button right now, smash the like button, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love hearing from you all. Now, back to Evelyn's nightmare. 2 of the men were massive, dark suits straining against thick shoulders. Between them stood someone younger, maybe early 30s, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than the diner's annual lease. Sharp features, hair swept back with brutal precision, eyes like frozen concrete. Evelyn set down the coffee pot, her arm aching from 6 years of this work. She was used to tired nurses, construction workers, students nursing hangovers. But this? The silence that spread from the door felt like a hand around her throat. She walked toward them, sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, the sound absurdly loud. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The man in the middle turned those cold eyes on her. "Are you Evelyn?" He already knew. This wasn't a question. He gestured toward the corner booth, the one with cracked vinyl taped over with duct tape. The booth where old Mr. Whitmore had sat every morning for 4 years. Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. That was his booth, his sacred space. The stranger slid into it like he belonged there. The 2 bodyguards positioned themselves at the entrance and kitchen door, sealing the room. The few remaining customers suddenly became very interested in their eggs. Evelyn approached, anger mixing with fear. "I'm Evelyn. Who are you?" The man placed a leather briefcase on the table. Metal clasps clicked loudly. "I am Marcus Whitmore, Jr. I'm the son of the man you knew as Mr. Whitmore." He leaned forward. "And we need to discuss the assets he foolishly left in your possession." Evelyn blinked. Assets? Mr. Whitmore lived in a studio above a laundromat. He counted coins for his tea. He wore the same cardigan until the elbows wore through. "I think you have the wrong person," she said softly. "Your father didn't have assets. He had a library card and a cat." Marcus's lips twitched without humor. He opened the briefcase. "You have no idea who my father was, Evelyn." A lawyer, thin and spectacled, slipped into the booth beside Marcus. He spread papers across the sticky table. Thick documents bound in blue, legal covers. Evelyn's head began to pound. The lawyer droned on about statutes and clauses, words like undue influence and mental incapacity floating through the greasy air. But Evelyn wasn't listening to him. She was watching Marcus. He was watching her hands. She realized she was wringing her apron. 6 months ago flashed through her mind. Mr. Whitmore trying to open crackers, hands trembling so badly from Parkinson's that he knocked over his water. The terror in his eyes. The humiliation. Evelyn had simply placed her hand over his shaking ones, steadied them, whispered a joke about the table being thirsty. She'd cleaned it up without breaking eye contact, protecting his dignity when it felt like everything was slipping away. Now his son sat there looking at her hands like they were thief's hands. "You think I stole from him?" Evelyn cut off the lawyer mid-sentence. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had steel in it. Marcus looked up, his face unreadable. My father was a complicated man, Miss Evelyn. He abandoned his family 20 years ago. Vanished. We assumed he was dead until the embassy contacted us about his remains. He leaned forward. Then we find a will drafted 3 months ago, leaving everything to a waitress he barely knew. This isn't just about money. It's about legacy. And I don't let my family's legacy fall into the hands of strangers who prey on lonely old men. The accusation hung there, gross and heavy. Heat rushed to Evelyn's face. Not shame. Fury. She thought of the winter coat she'd bought him from the thrift store when she realized he was layering 3 sweaters. The nights she'd walked him home because ice on the sidewalk scared him. He'd never mentioned a son, never mentioned a family. He'd only talked about birds in the park and history books. Holdings? She laughed, sharp and bitter. You think I preyed on him? Your father sat in this booth for 4 years. He spent Christmas here because he had nowhere else to go. He spent his birthday here eating pie I paid for because nobody called him. Tears pricked her eyes, but she wouldn't let them fall. I didn't know he had money. I didn't care. He was my friend. And if he was so important to your legacy, where were you? Where were you when he couldn't tie his shoes? Where were you when he was coughing so hard he couldn't breathe? Absolute silence. The lawyer looked terrified. Marcus didn't blink. He just studied her, clinical and detached, like she was a lab specimen. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a gold lighter, turned it over in his fingers. Click, click, click. He didn't answer her question. Instead, he signaled the lawyer to continue. The lawyer's voice trembled. The bequest includes the deed to this building, not just the diner, the entire block, the apartment complex upstairs, the laundromat, the corner store, all of it. Evelyn stared at him. The floor felt unstable. The diner. Mr. Whitmore owned the building. Sal had always complained about the landlord being a ghost, some recluse who only communicated through a P.O. box. It was Mr. Whitmore. He'd paid for his tea with coins fished from a ragged pocket while owning the ground she stood on. Marcus watched the shock register on her face. For the first time, his expression softened just a fraction. He was looking for the lie, the act, the moment she'd reveal she'd known all along. But Evelyn's confusion was total. She backed away from the table, hands shaking. I don't want it. I don't want any of it. Take it. Her voice cracked. I have to get back to work. She fled to the kitchen, the metal door swinging shut behind her. She braced herself against the stainless steel counter, breathing hard, the smell of grease and dish soap grounding her. Sal was chopping onions, oblivious to the fact that ownership of his kitchen had just transferred in booth 4. Evelyn closed her eyes, trying to reconcile the shivering old man who loved crossword, puzzles with this secret landlord who had a son that looked like a movie villain. The rest of her shift blurred. When she finally worked up the courage to return to the floor, the booth was empty. The men were gone. But on the table, centered precisely on the taped vinyl, sat a business card. Heavy black stock with gold embossing. Marcus Whitmore, Jr., CEO, Whitmore Holdings. Underneath it, a crisp $100 bill. Not a tip, a message. They weren't done. She knew with sinking certainty they were just getting started. The next day, rain stopped but left behind sticky humidity that fogged the windows. Evelyn arrived early, hoping to lose herself in prep work. The bell rang at 8 a.m. sharp. She looked up. Him, Marcus, alone this time. No bodyguards, no lawyer. He wore navy blue, no tie, top button undone. calculated casualness that made him look more dangerous, not less. He walked straight to the corner booth and sat down. Evelyn froze behind the counter. The diner was empty except for Mrs. Higgins eating oatmeal in the back. She walked over slowly, heart hammering. "We don't serve caviar here," she said, defensive. Marcus looked up. "Green tea, and whatever he ate. The special." "No," Evelyn corrected automatically. "He didn't eat the special. He ate oatmeal with sliced bananas and a side of rye toast. Burnt." "Then that." Evelyn hesitated. She wanted to throw him out. She wanted to scream at him for disrupting her life, for making her question the friendship she'd treasured. But she was a waitress. He was a customer. She turned and went to the kitchen. When she returned with the mug and bowl, she watched him stare at the steam rising from the oatmeal. He didn't eat immediately. He picked up the spoon, his manicured fingers looking wrong against the cheap silverware. He took a bite, chewed slowly. His face betrayed nothing. "It's bland," he stated. "Your father had high blood pressure," Evelyn said, wiping the already clean table next to him. "I made him cut down on salt. He complained every single day for 4 years. But he ate it." Marcus paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. He looked at the empty seat across from him, trying to visualize the ghost of a father he hadn't seen in 2 decades. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why did you care? You're not family. You're not from our world." Evelyn stopped wiping. She looked at him. Really looked. Beneath the expensive haircut and arrogance, she saw exhaustion. Deep, bone-tired exhaustion. "I don't know about your world," she said. "But in my world, when someone is lonely, you sit with them. When they're hungry, you feed them. It's not a transaction. It's just being human." Marcus stared at her. His dark eyes searched hers with intense, uncomfortable curiosity. He didn't understand her. She realized that unsettled him more than if she'd screamed. He was a man fluent in leverage, power, debt. He didn't speak the language of kindness without receipts. He ate the rest of the oatmeal in silence, left money on the table. No tip this time. Just a small nod, barely perceptible, and walked out. Evelyn watched him go, feeling strange tension in her chest. Mr. Whitmore hadn't just left her a building. He'd left her a problem. A very dangerous, very broken problem named Marcus. If you're still watching up to now, type "I'm still here" in the comment section. Let me know you're riding this emotional roller coaster with me. The following Tuesday, Marcus effectively set up office in booth 4. He arrived at 9, just after breakfast rush, this time with only the bespectacled lawyer. He spread blueprints across the table. Blueprints of her block, typed furiously on a slim laptop. His presence sucked oxygen from the room. Regulars who usually lingered over second cups paid quickly and left. Evelyn finally approached with a coffee pot. Not because he asked, because ritual was her armor. She poured. He paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Didn't look up. "The plumbing in the upstairs units is 60 years old," he said, flat and observational. "The roof needs structural reinforcement. The electrical grid is a fire hazard waiting to happen." He finally looked up. "My father was a slumlord." Evelyn stiffened. He kept rents low. He knew everyone by name. He fixed Mrs. Gable's radiator himself last winter because he didn't want to raise her rent to hire a contractor. He wasn't a slumlord. He was just doing his best. Marcus removed his reading glasses slowly, highlighting the exhaustion around his eyes. His best resulted in a liability nightmare. He looked around the diner, gaze lingering on chipped paint and worn linoleum. He lived in filth. died with millions in overseas accounts. Yet he lived here fixing radiators. It makes no sense. He looked at Evelyn. Really looked like she was a puzzle piece that refused to fit. You defend him even now, when you know he lied to you about who he was. Evelyn set the pot down on the table. The lawyer's sharp intake of breath at the breach of etiquette meant nothing to her. He didn't lie, she said softly. He just didn't tell me everything. There's a difference. Maybe he didn't want to be the man with millions. Maybe he just wanted to be Mr. Whitmore. Marcus scoffed, sharp and short. But he didn't argue. He took a sip of coffee, grimaced slightly, perhaps the taste growing on him, and turned his screen toward her. These are renovation plans. If you're keeping this building, you can't keep it as a ruin. I won't allow my father's name attached to a collapsed structure. He was taking over, presuming, managing. But beneath the arrogance, Evelyn saw something else. A twisted form of care. He was trying to fix the building because he couldn't fix the relationship. 2 days later, everything shifted from the public theater of the diner to the intimate silence of the second floor. Marcus demanded access to his father's apartment, the studio directly above the laundromat. Evelyn held the only keys. She had no choice but to go with him. The stairwell was narrow, smelling of dryer sheets and old wood, a scent that made Evelyn's chest tighten. She unlocked the door. The mechanism stuck, requiring the jiggle and twist maneuver Mr. Whitmore had taught her. The door swung open. A single room, sparse, meticulously clean. A bed made with military precision. A wall of bookshelves sagging under history books and bird-watching guides. Afternoon sun filtered through sheer curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in stillness. Marcus stepped inside, expensive shoes loud on hardwood. He stopped in the center, looking around, expression oscillating between confusion and disdain. "There's nothing here," he murmured. "No safe, no documents, just this." He walked to the small kitchenette, running a finger along the counter, opened the refrigerator. Empty except for pickles and expired milk. Evelyn stood by the door, feeling like an intruder in her own memories. He liked it simple. Said having too many things made his mind noisy. Marcus turned to the bookshelf, pulling out a worn field guide to North American birds. He flipped it open. A photograph fluttered to the floor. Evelyn moved to pick it up, but Marcus was faster. He froze, staring at the small rectangular image. Evelyn stepped closer. A young boy, maybe 7 or 8, standing in front of the Washington Monument. Serious, stiff in a school uniform. It was Marcus. On the back, in shaky handwriting, a date from 25 years ago. "He kept this," Marcus whispered, voice cracking. "A fissure in the marble facade. He left us. Never called, never wrote. But he kept this in a book about sparrows." Silence, suffocating and heavy. Evelyn saw the tremble in his hand, the same tremble his father had when nervous. She reached out instinctively, placing her hand on his forearm. The contact was brief. He didn't pull away. "He didn't hate you," she said quietly. "He was afraid of himself. He told me once that the people he loved were better off without his shadow falling on them. I didn't know he meant you. Didn't know he meant a son." Marcus lowered the photo, jaw tightening as he fought for control. He carefully placed it back in the book, shelved it, turned his back to hide his face. "We're done here," he said, voice rough. "Lock up." The revelation changed everything. Marcus continued coming daily, but the entourage receded, leaving him exposed in a way that seemed to unsettle him. Late Friday, dinner rush tapering into quiet. Evelyn wiped down the counter, exhausted. Marcus sat in his booth, nursing tea he'd been nursing for an hour. His phone rang, not the professional chirp of his business line. A harsh, jarring buzz from a burner phone in his inside pocket. He answered immediately, posture shifting from relaxed to coiled steel. He spoke in clipped, guttural English. His voice dropped an octave, becoming violent and sharp. Evelyn didn't need to understand every word. She understood the tone. It was terrifying. The air in the diner dropped 10 degrees. Remaining customers looked up, startled, sensing sudden violence in the corner. Marcus hung up and stood abruptly. He looked at Evelyn. For a second, the mask was gone. His eyes were wide, dark pits of adrenaline and something that looked like panic. "I have to go," he said, tossing bills onto the table without counting. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone, not even police. Just go home, Evelyn. Now." He didn't wait. He stormed out. The bell jingled with mocking cheerfulness. Evelyn stood there, rag dripping onto the floor, heart hammering. This was the shadow Mr. Whitmore had spoken of. This was the darkness he'd run halfway around the world to escape. She moved to the door, locking it, flipping the sign to closed. Through the window, she saw a black SUV screech to the curb. Marcus got in. Flash of metal that might have been a gun. The car peeled, away into the Chicago night. She realized then, the inheritance wasn't a gift. It was a burden of protection. Mr. Whitmore hadn't just left her a building. He'd left her the safe haven his son could never inhabit. The peace he couldn't give Marcus. Perhaps hoping one day they'd meet, and she could share it with him. She sat in the booth he'd vacated, warmth of his body still lingering on vinyl, and waited for fear to subside. She was no longer just an observer. 3 days of silence. Evelyn worked in distracted tension, jumping every time the door opened. When Marcus finally returned, he looked like he'd aged 5 years. There was a bruise blooming along his jawline, poorly concealed with makeup. His left arm held stiffly against his side. He walked in during mid-afternoon lull, diner empty of lunch crowd. He didn't sit in the booth. He sat on a stool at the counter, directly in front of where she was refilling sugar dispensers. He looked diminished. The expensive suit, slightly rumpled. Arrogance replaced by weary resignation. "I've drafted the transfer papers," he said, sliding a thick manila envelope across the formica. "It's all there. Title, deeds, renovation funds I promised. It's yours. Legally, irrevocably yours." He didn't look at the envelope. He looked at the coffee machine. "I'm returning to New York tomorrow. My business here is concluded." Evelyn looked at the envelope, then at him. She saw the pain he was hiding, physical and emotional. She didn't touch the papers. "You're running away," she said, just like he did. Marcus let out a dry, humorless laugh. "I'm not running. I'm surviving. My world doesn't allow for nostalgia, Evelyn. It doesn't allow for sitting in diners and drinking bad tea. It consumes. My father knew that. That's why he left. He didn't leave to save himself. He left to save me from becoming him." His voice dropped to a whisper. But he failed. I am exactly what he feared. Evelyn reached across the counter, ignoring professional distance, and placed her hand over his. His skin was cold. "You aren't him," she said firmly. He was a gentleman who made himself small to fit in a world he didn't understand. You're a strong man trying to break a world that wants to crush you. But you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to leave. The building's big. There's space. You could stay. Not as the boss. Just as a son. As a tenant. Marcus looked at her hand on his, then up at her face. His eyes were wet. Shocking vulnerability. He quickly blinked away. "I cannot," he whispered. "But thank you for seeing him, and for seeing me." He pulled his hand away gently, leaving the envelope between them. "Keep the building, Evelyn. Make it warm. Make it the place he wanted it to be." He stood, nodded once, and walked out of Sal's diner for the last time. Evelyn stood there, holding the envelope, feeling the weight of legacy pressing into her palms. 6 months later, the scaffolding finally came. Down. Brickwork pointed, windows replaced. But the sign above the diner remained. Sal's, same faded letters, same cheerful promise of eggs and burnt toast. Evelyn stood on the sidewalk, wiping her hands on a fresh apron, looking up at the second-floor apartment windows. They were clean now, adorned with flower boxes Mrs. Gable had insisted on planting. Geraniums blazing red against gray Chicago brick. The diner was busy, hum of conversation and clattering plates spilling onto the street. Same rhythm, same grind, but the weight felt different. It felt anchored. Inside, the corner booth was occupied by college students debating philosophy, unaware of the history etched into vinyl seats. Evelyn walked back inside, bell jingling familiar greeting. She went behind the counter, checked the mail Sal had tossed there. Bills, flyers, and a postcard. No return address, just a postmark from a remote coastal town in Vermont. On the front, a picture of dense green forest. On the back, in elegant, sharp handwriting, 3 words. "I saw a sparrow." Evelyn smiled. Small, private, an expression that softened tired lines around her eyes. She tucked the postcard onto the corkboard behind the register, right next to the faded Polaroid of Mr. Whitmore at his last birthday party. The one where she'd surprised him with apple pie and a single candle. She picked up the coffee pot, feeling the familiar ache in her shoulder, and turned to the room. The coffee was fresh. The toast was burnt. The world kept spinning. But in this small corner of Chicago, the ghosts had found their peace, and the living were finally, truly home. She walked toward table 4, ready to pour. Sometimes kindness doesn't destroy your life. Sometimes it rebuilds it in ways you never imagined. Sometimes the inheritance isn't about money. It's about carrying forward the love someone couldn't speak out loud. It's about being the safe harbor for broken people trying to find their way home. Evelyn learned that the hard way. Through lawyers and blueprints and midnight phone calls and bruised jaws and photographs tucked in bird-watching guides. Through oatmeal and burnt toast and 100 small moments of showing up. Mr. Whitmore gave her a building. But really, he gave her a mission. To be the warmth in a cold world. To be the steadying hand when everything trembles. To prove that kindness isn't weakness. It's the strongest foundation you can build a life on. And somewhere in a forest in Vermont, Marcus Whitmore looked up at the sky and watched a small brown sparrow hop from branch to branch. And maybe, just maybe, he understood what his father had been trying to tell him all along. Some legacies aren't passed down through blood or money. They're passed down through the people who show us how to be human when the world tries to make us monsters. Evelyn poured coffee into a ceramic mug, smiled at the tired nurse who just finished a double shift, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Before you go, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button if this story touched your heart. Subscribe to True Spark Stories because we bring you real emotions every single time. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, what time it is right now, and whether this story made you think differently about kindness. Our spark starts with you. Thank you for joining our mission to brighten lives, one whisper at a time. I'll see you in the next story.